Phil Steck, thank you so much for coming on and speaking with us today. Appreciate it.
And I appreciate coming on, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's talk about the budget, where we are here in 2026, your priorities as we head now into the meat of the session, as we get into some of these conversations. Obviously, affordability is the big one right now. There's a lot of different ways to tackle that. We've seen the governor make some different proposals. At this point, are there some of those proposals you like, some things that you have in mind in terms of what can make the biggest difference for New Yorkers?
Well, I think some of the things on affordability, the one thing that really boggles my mind is this nuclear energy thing, because forget the environmental aspects. It is completely unaffordable. Right now, New York State is subsidizing the existing nuclear plants in the billions of dollars. If we invested that in clean energy, ultimately, green energy brings the cost down. The problem is in the conversion, that it can be costly to convert, but if we were investing those billions of dollars in that, we wouldn't have a problem. Some of the other things, we could talk about childcare is an issue of affordability. Well, in her proposal, she's taking money out of the state budget, putting it into pre-K for 3-year-olds in New York City to appease Mamdani. But on the other hand, we do not have universal pre-K here in upstate New York. We have about 50% coverage, and there are districts that don't even have full-day kindergarten. So I don't see that as particularly helpful. I'm trying to think of some of the other affordability issues. She raised auto insurance. Okay. The main reason auto premiums are high is not fraud. We've been through this with Medicaid. There was we're going to have the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General. We're going to stop fraud. Medicaid is still extremely expensive. Precious little fraud has been stopped, and you waste tons and tons of money trying to investigate fraud. So I don't think that stopping fraud is the key to affordability. And then finally, on housing, you know, I saw Bankrate says now that you have to budget 43% of your household income for housing. The old number was 30%. Relaxing environmental regulations on home construction is not going to make any difference whatsoever. The problem is that private developers go where the money is. Yeah. The incentive is to build luxury housing. That's why when you look around, you see a lot of luxury housing, a lot of luxury apartments. That has nothing to do with the environmental laws. So I don't see that. I would say overall there are some good things in this budget on what I would call maybe smaller items, but the big ticket items, there's not a lot of change there. I think the approach of the state of New York with all the tax credits for various things is no different under Governor Hochul than it was under Governor Cuomo. I would say that certainly this governor is a much more pleasant person to interact with than the former governor, no question. But substance of policy, not a lot of difference.
Let's go off the child care issue.
Yeah.
Especially, I think upstate, there's a lot of questions about that, and a rollout of 2028.
I can't vote to give it all to New York City.
Okay. So that's where you draw the line in the sand.
Absolutely. We went through this with Governor Cuomo,
yeah,
and I'm not doing it again.
So what's then the other, then how do you do it upstate? Then what is the other option?
You got to raise revenue. And there is no revenue raisers in this budget. She's simply relying on the fact that Wall Street's had a really good year, and because of that, their bonuses will be high, and therefore they will pay more in income tax than they did last year. But my constituents are not Wall Street brokers. Their incomes are not going up where they can afford private child care. Their cost of housing is up, energy is up, food is up, pensions are down. So I think we have to go in a different direction than where we have been.
The colleagues on the other side of the aisle have been talking about the tax credit for child tax to pump more money there to help alleviate some of this issue. What do you think about that?
Well,
when it comes to child
I
care,
think that's probably the only area where I think tax credits are valuable. One of the major problems we have in the state of New York is we give all kinds of tax credits to all kinds of businesses, which deprives us of revenue without tremendous return. All the studies of the state comptroller have shown that it doesn't, it is a net loser for the state.
And the governor defended that.
Well, she's wrong.
Yeah, she did. She was asked about that in the Q&A, and she defended the economic development and
it's not
Hollywood
economic
tax
development.
credit.
For example,
Yeah.
let's take the motion picture tax credit. Yep. Those folks come in, they produce a film, they're here for a few weeks, they spend money in local businesses, but then they're gone. That's not long-term economic development. You know, we still have tax credits for yacht building in this state. So
that's a good one.
Right. I think tax credits to help average people with the costs of childcare, I think that's reasonable. I do not think the tax credits as a vehicle for economic development have been effective. I think that the way to toward economic development is to build the best infrastructure of any state in the nation, and it will attract business here. We're not doing that.
And to talk about Wall Street for a second, I know that the stock transfer tax has been big. Obviously, if that was put into play here, you would see more revenue.
There would be no problem.
Do you think, what is that role in the development and the revenues that the state's raising right now? I mean, can you count on that for the next? This is something I've asked a lot of people of what the budget looks like.
The problem with the stock transfer tax politically is that there's an organization in New York City called the Partnership from New York, which is a lobbying entity for Wall Street. They're campaign donation friendly, and they make the argument that Wall Street would move. That is actually not the argument they're really making. What they're saying is if the price of this gets into a concept called elasticity of demand. So if you take oil, demand for oil is inelastic because if you drive a gas-based car and the price goes up, you have no choice, you have to pay that price.
Right.
They argue that the price of stock is perfectly elastic. An increase of 0.1% in the price of stock, people will choose to buy it elsewhere than in New York. There's virtually no product out there where demand is perfectly elastic. There are other exchanges that have, we're talking about a 0.1% tax, whereas in other jurisdictions, the tax is 1%, or even raised to 1.3% in Hong Kong. And Goldman Sachs Global Markets said correctly, people don't make investment decisions based on a transfer tax. So what you're doing with the stock transfer tax is you're actually taxing mostly non-New Yorkers, because that's most of the people who buy stock in New York. So if we had that, you're right, you could really make transformative change. You could do all your conversion to electricity like Franklin Roosevelt did with rural electrification. You could do all that and completely hold the citizenry harmless, and then everyone would start to benefit from the lower cost of energy.
So let's get to the energy costs, utility costs. It's been such a huge topic. And a lot of different ways. You'll hear from Republicans saying we need to be all the above, we need fossil fuels, at natural gas. And I even was able to ask Rob Ort, the Senate minority leader, about these proposals to hold these companies more accountable. And they say, well, why aren't they price gouging in Pennsylvania? We're not going to say we're accusing them of something they're not doing everywhere. This is just in New York. The concept of this, where are you at in terms of these utility bills? I mean, you just mentioned the nuclear aspect. Is that a part of this?
No, it's absurd. Yeah. We are already subsidizing nuclear power, $33 billion of subsidy, because it can't make it on its own. One of the problems that we have in New York with our energy costs is we finance it all through charges to ratepayers. The ratepayers are you and I. And the more that we continue that, the worse off we are. So the reality is, for example, building a new home with electrical power is much less expensive than with gas. And in fact, there was one scenario where one of the utilities actually paid people to install electric appliances in their home because they wanted to avoid the high cost of installing gas for that particular development. So if we want to go in the direction of affordability, the green energy is the way to go. The problem is, and I don't deny this at all, is that in the short run, you're going to have some conversion costs. But we've been subsidizing the fossil fuel industry also for years. So in the stock transfer tax bill, we allocate money, which would be about $2 billion a year, to go to, so the government, like FDR did with rural electrification, the government would take care of funding that conversion so it wouldn't be on the backs of consumers.
What do you believe is driving? You mentioned the nuclear aspects, that's one element. What else do you think is driving the costs be higher right now?
Well, I think New York has we have no, unlike Texas and other states, we really have no energy resources other than hydro. And if we go green with the solar and wind, we can create some in this state, but we have to buy it from other states. And folks don't realize that one of the, taxes are lower in Texas. Well, one of the reasons is because when you go to the pump, you're paying taxes to the state of Texas for bringing that oil here. They have excise taxes. All the oil-producing states do. So
why not just get back to fracking then?
Well, fracking is an environmental issue. I will repeat. The green energy, the wind is free, the sun is free. So yes, you have to build the equipment to harness it, but that's why I'm saying the state has to invest in that equipment. We don't want to have that done on the backs of the consumers.
Talk about revenue raisers, the nicotine pouch tax, putting that under the umbrella of tobacco. I've already heard big tobacco say this is a public health issue. We've heard Blake Washington say it's a public health issue. Where do you stand on that?
I would support that.
Yeah.
We've had that, we had this issue before with vapes. And I remember the vape stores came in and they were saying, it's a way to get off smoking. And my response is, this isn't about getting people off smoking. This is about making money. And why should vapes be taxed any less than cigarettes? They're very unhealthy. And I think the same is true of these nicotine things. Can they get you out of smoking? They can, but they have other health consequences.
Do you think this could have an unintended consequences of getting people back on smoking? Because that's the Philip Morris International. They're trying to get people off of that. They said this is going to.
I don't see that these nicotine pouches are, as widespread as cigarette smoking was at one time. There are some people who do it. We just did legislation to put warning labels on kratom, and which is can be a very dangerous thing, and that I think that is important from a public health standpoint. I think nicotine can also be dangerous. Look, we've been promoting that we should proliferate making and selling alcohol in the state. That's not necessarily a good thing either. Although one unintended consequence of the legalization of marijuana is reduced sales of alcohol. On the other hand, we are not looking at, marijuana-induced psychosis is a real thing. Usually it's temporary, but there are people who are prone to more serious mental illness, who the marijuana usage triggers it. And she did propose in her budget some sort of agency that would study marijuana. Frankly, this is a typical New York State thing. I think we know, all we have to do is have a hearing and bring in the medical professionals, and they'll tell you what the situation is with marijuana. The difficulty is, from a legislative standpoint, is some of the members are from a different generation and they have a different concept of marijuana. The marijuana of the 1960s is not the marijuana of today. The THC content is highly elevated, and so we need to start taking seriously not only legalizing marijuana, but regulating it in the interest of the public health.
So let's talk psilocybin then.
Oh, psilocybin. Yeah, it's interesting about these things. There are a lot of academic institutions that are studying psilocybin and...
Yeah, there's been more. That's why we're talking about it more, because there's been more studies, right?
Yes, there are. I mean, I don't know that it's been proven to be beneficial. Some people have sworn by it. I am on the health committee. I would certainly listen. That's one of those things where you have to listen to what the arguments are and make up your mind. So I haven't made up my mind about psilocybin.
Do you think there's any weight or any movement one way or another in terms of some potential implementation?
There's more, I would say more interest in psilocybin, which for your listeners is the active ingredient in hallucinogenic mushrooms. There is more interest in using that as an antidote to PTSD. There are a lot of veterans with PTSD that believe in psilocybin. So I don't know that we're there yet, but I think the scientific data is still coming in.
Yeah. Really quick, just because we've been talking, the other big is school aid in terms of the budget and what the pie chart, and the money that the state spends on it. And I think one of the questions is why is New York getting enough bang for its buck, right? It's spending more poor people than anyone in the country, but doesn't win in every category. I think there's some criticism behind that. Do you think there's a better way to be able to get more out of it?
This is very interesting because the Andrew Cuomo argument was that all you need is a good teacher and we can solve all educational problems. The thing in New York is, I think education in New York is adequately funded overall. I think New York has an excellent education system overall, but what you see in New York is great disparities between wealthy areas and poor areas. We happen to have some of the greatest gaps between rich and poor also in the nation. So we have some of the best schools in the nation. I remember taking the speaker in a tour of my district, and we're driving along Route 146 past your station, and he points at this building, and he says to me, with finely trimmed lawns, beautiful building, he says, "What's that?" I said, "That's the Niskayuna High School, one of the best high schools in the United States." So this is a community with a lot of professionals. Incomes tend to be higher in Niskayuna than in other parts of my district. And they've had an outstanding education system for a very long time because the citizens demand it here. Yeah. So, but there are other areas of the state where they do really struggle with problems of poverty, and the performance is not as good there. So there are other factors involved. If we take Schenectady, I remember one of the superintendents telling me that for our students who are not transient, that have been in the system from the beginning and graduate from Schenectady High School, our outcomes are as good as any. But we have a lot of students who come from poor backgrounds, who are transient through the system, and that's a more difficult challenge.
Right, and you need to be able to be very specific in how you address those issues, right?
Right.
And this year, the governor kind of going blanket and giving everyone just more, which I think is interesting considering you had the whole Rockefeller study done on that funding a couple years ago now.
Yeah, they're supposed to redo the formula.
Yeah.
But I was telling the superintendents in my district, be careful what you wish for, because you're doing well under this formula. You might not do as well under some future formula.
Yeah.
So we don't know where that's headed.
So we have hours and hours of budget hearings coming up starting next week. Is there something or one or two things specific that you want to learn about or hear about from those that come to testify or that you want to question?
Well, it usually, I am involved in the health committee. I'm involved with, obviously, chair of alcoholism and substance abuse. I'm on the labor committee. The labor budget is not typically very controversial. We were told by some of the advocates that the budget for alcoholism and substance abuse was significantly cut. I want to find out about that. Also,
in what way? What do you mean by that?
Just in absolute dollars.
In terms of addressing and giving
Yeah,
program
you have
services
to fund
for people.
the programs and services.
Yeah.
And those things are not, they're not robustly funded now.
Right, and they're not going away.
Right,
Yeah.
the problems are still there, obviously. Another area that's huge right now is problem gambling. And when the sports betting is a big problem, particularly with young men. And there's a lot in the governor's budget to increase funding for treatment of sports betting. She actually included two of our bills. One prohibits the sports betting companies from using AI to get people to bet. She included our legislation to have problem gambling covered by insurance, just like substance use disorder and alcoholism are. But on the other hand, there's nothing there about discouraging gambling.
Yeah.
We're not talking about making it illegal. It's accessible outside of New York State. But one bill of ours I think is very important is to ban advertising for gambling during sports events. That we ban ads for cigarette smoking. So I don't think that I should have to sit through a New York Rangers game, if you can still sit through a Rangers game, and have to see constant over, under, this and that, a lot of terms which I don't even understand because I'm not a gambler. But people are gambling on plays, gambling on everything. And it's a big problem right now. We held a hearing on this. It was a joint hearing with my committee and Carrie Werner's, who has racing and wagering. And one of the testimony of one of the witnesses was very impactful, and that is that the Europeans have had this legalized betting for a long time. They made a lot of these techniques that the gambling companies use to encourage betting illegal. We just started, so we're not there yet, and we need to get there.
What about the whole poly-market Kalshi issue?
We have a bill to ban legislators from engaging in the poly market.
Because you had the what was the other day? You had, and this is all alleged and speculation, but you had the press conference the other day. This is an example for people of at the White House with the press secretary who ended her. People were betting on how long she would go, and it finished with like 30 seconds to spare. So everyone had hit the under, you know what I mean? Like betting on things like that, betting on going and mobilizing troops in Greenland, or betting on an election.
Betting on Venezuela. Like people made money on Venezuela.
Like that's
because they had inside information.
Right. Can you regulate that?
Oh, of course you can. I mean, we've got the Securities and Exchange Commission, which used to do a fabulous job of regulating Wall Street. I mean, you got to have a real commitment to it. It was, again, an FDR era reform designed to make the market fairer for investors. A lot of people don't want the market to be fairer for investors. They want the market to be fairer for themselves. our president included. So we have a bill actually to tax crypto. I mean, I remember I had a constituent write to me about that. And he said, I enjoy betting on crypto. Don't tax it. And I said, well, my response was, I enjoy going to watch the Mets play at Citi Field, but I am subject to local tax and also state tax on those tickets. So I don't see why crypto should be exempt from taxation. It's speculative. It doesn't serve the same purpose as Wall Street investing, which is to raise capital for the companies. What we try to discourage, which is a point for the stock transfer tax, is simply using the market for gambling rather than investing.
Interesting. I think we'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.